am a 45 years old woman, my husband and I have a 15-aunt daughter Kate and a 9-year-old son Sam. My husband has a brother and a 40-year-old sister, Eva. Eva and her husband James have a daughter, Allegra. She is also 15 years old. Kate and Allegra have always been compared in the family. From the time they were born, it seemed to be a competition of who would walk first, talk first, do more, achieve more. And Allegra was always first. I won't go too much into detail about Allegra because that's not really the point, but I will say she's a beautiful, intelligent, truly one-of-a-kind girl, and her parents have done a great job raising her. My in-laws fell in love with her and think she hung the moon. This bothered me and made me sad for Kate, but I let it go for the most part. There's no doubt in my mind that they love all the kids equally, but out of the two girls you can tell who they admire more. Every summer, the whole family visits a holiday home that Eva shares with my in-laws. Over the summer, Kate met a boy, Luke, who was also holidaying in the area. They started dating. This was Kate's first experience with boys. Allegra had friends who were nearby, so for our first few weeks we didn't see her much. About 3/4 of the way through the holiday, Kate invited the boy she'd been seeing to dinner. Allegra was told to come, and afterwards she would be going to a party. At the dinner, it was clear that Luke was very attracted to Allegra. After dinner, Luke decided he would go to the party Allegra was going to as he had also been invited. They both asked Kate to go, but she wasn't allowed and was very upset. My husband and I felt it was not a safe or appropriate environment at her age. Eva informed us, because she knows we do not allow Kate into these environments, that it was an adult party, where there would be drinking and possibly other things going on. Allegra has grown up in a place where these kind of things are much more normal. And Eva and her husband made the choice to let Allegra live those experiences. From what I know and have seen, she handles it exceptionally and it has not caused any issues. However, it is not the way we have chosen to parent Kate, and so we didn't allow her to go. The next morning, Allegra came downstairs and asked to talk to me and Eva. She said at the party Luke was flirting with her and showed her some messages he'd sent her. We decided we would all talk to Kate. Kate spent the next 2 days miserable. When she finally came out of her room, Kate was caustic and everyone was getting a bit fed up with her attitude. Eventually, my father-in-law jokingly said, "Your mistake was introducing him to Allegra. How did you think that was going to go for you?" My mother-in-law told him off but added that Luke handled it terribly, but the outcome was sort of inevitable. Kate left the table in tears. We managed to get through the rest of the holiday, but when my husband brought up plans for Christmas, Kate refused to go. She said she couldn't bear being ridiculed by her own family and constantly compared to Allegra. After seeing how much this was affecting her, I spoke to my husband and said we shouldn't go. He argued that it would be wrong to let Kate take away time with family just because of a boy. I reminded him that this has been happening since they were born, but he said that we can't shield Kate from every special person in the world. He said he would talk to his parents about their comments, but that we should not set a precedent of letting Kate run away from reality. My boyfriend and I have been studying together at university, and while he is studying part-time, working part-time and engaging heavily in his amateur acting career, while I am studying full-time and working part-time, we share one subject at uni together. On top of this, he is trying to pick up another hobby while looking after his grandfather, who is in his final stages, in a nursing home. As you can imagine, for the past 6 months he has very little time to cut out of his week to spend with me. None, in fact. I have been fine with this for the most part. I have been driving 45 minutes 3+// times a week to get to his house so we can steal a few hours together, but he doesn't have time to spare. This is an inconvenience I can live with. However, he has been asking me to do a lot of other things too. He has frustrated me multiple times with demands that I visit his grandfather, who does not recognize me, for 2 hours, which turns into 4.5 hours, or help him with a family matter, which lasts 5 hours or so. Every time this happens, he promises he will drive me home. And every time he says he doesn't have time anymore and I need to catch the train home, 1 hour plus walking. I have spoken to him about how this is unfairly affecting me, and he seems to take it on board, but just forgets again the next time he needs something. After forcing me to spend $600 plus on his best friend's destination wedding, the weekend before we both had 2 major exams due. He demands that we switch our exam times because he didn't spend enough time studying and he needed the extra day. I concede and he squanders his spare day sleeping because he needed it. I take my classes very seriously and I feel very over by his demands. I understand that family matters / best friends are important things, but he has eaten into hours and hours of my study time, and my grades are dropping. Not only that, but it's affecting my emotional health also. I have expressed to him that it is affecting me badly, but he tells me I'm being very unsympathetic and selfish. What's more is that I have about $10,000 in savings. He recently became aware of this and has demanded that I help him pay his bills because we're a team, he is broke. I helped him with a few, but drew the line after $500 because he is very irresponsible with money and there's only so much I can pour out before it seriously affects me. He is also demanding that I give him access to my bank account because we are in this together. And he wants to marry me one day, so we should start sharing now. I don't really know what to do. I want to be a good girlfriend and do what he needs me to do right now, but it's beginning to affect my health. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times, and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem. And though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me he had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action. Seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. Background: my grandparents have always been a big part of my life, as have the rest of my family. They had 5 children, including my father, and 13 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren. My grandparents are quite rich. They had 3 businesses until last year when my grandfather died. I am the child of my grandchildren and have always been very close to them. My grandma used to babysit me until I could go to kindergarten. I wrap Christmas presents for her every year. I decorate their house, and I worked at their bar on Fridays in college, no pay, as they are too old to do these things themselves. All this was offered to my cousins, but they never helped. My grandparents ran a show horse farm for over 40 years. It was what my father took with him and I quickly began to love. I used to go every weekend with my grandma up until high school when I started studying. Even though I don't ride horses anymore, my dad and I go to clean the stalls and look after the horses every week when my grandparents are away on trips. Usually once every 2 months. My grandparents were a huge part of my life. Problem: my grandmother died 4 weeks ago. It was devastating. My grandmother left my aunts, uncles, and dad about $85,000 each. Money for which she and my grandfather worked very, very hard. It was expected. What was not expected was that they would leave me just over $45,000 along with some other valuables. I was honestly shocked. All my cousins received about $2,000 each and a few trinkets. Obviously, you can see where it was going. My aunts and uncles were at the reading when I was told, so they told their children. Everyone except the parents is furious. My cousins, who are already adults, demand that I divide them equally. I don't feel like I should. I was very close to my grandparents and did a lot for them, but it's hard. My family is very tight-knit and we have holidays / monthly parties / dinners / etc. together, every year. I never expected money to tear us apart. This money can change a lot for me. I could pay off my $10,000 student loan and put the rest into my upcoming wedding / future kids / savings account. A small part of me wants to share it equally, just to have everyone together. But there was a reason they left this to me. They didn't do it to hurt anyone. I was the only one who visited them and helped them. None of them took the time to see them, except for family gatherings. But no one understands this except my parents. It seems to me that I alone destroy the family. My aunts and uncles won't talk to my father until I split the money, and my cousins won't talk to me. I only have a student loan and a car payment, so I don't have much debt, but it could give me a comfortable future. They all keep throwing in my face that they have families, house payments, college to pay for, etc. They keep saying I've been planning this for a long time, but I really didn't. I loved my grandparents. My fiancé tells me to forget about them and do what's best for me, but I'm a big family man. I don't want to split the money, that could really help me, but I feel like they can play with me, forcing me to choose between them and this. My parents also want me to keep the money for myself, as they think my family members are being ridiculous and demanding it. Is it right for me to keep that much? I feel like I deserve it. Is it right for me to put this money on my family? Or are the people I've been so close to all my life taking advantage of me? $45,000 versus $2,000 is a huge difference. P.S. There is more in the will than I explained. Houses, classic cars, horses, farm, land, CDs, etc. The cash / checking accounts I was given is the only thing that seems to be a problem for everyone. I have inherited more money than my cousins. They demand that I divide it equally between them or never speak to them again.